Received testimony from General Glen VanHerck, Commander of the United States Northern Command and North America Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, and General Laura Richardson, Commander of the United States Southern Command. General Richardson, I would like to welcome you to your first posture hearing in your current command, and I want to thank both of you for your decades of service to our nation. On behalf of the committee, I also want to thank the women and men serving under your commands for their selfless dedication and service. Thank you very much. The United States is faced with a wide range of security threats around the globe, but we are increasingly finding these threats edging closer and closer to home. Our strategic competitors, China and Russia, are seeking ways to expand their power regionally in South America and the Arctic, as well as through advancements in long-range missile capabilities and offensive cyber tools. At the same time, this competition is unfolding amidst a global pandemic, environmental degradation from climate change, and the emergence of highly disruptive technologies. The interconnected nature of these threats compounds the challenges that NORTHCOM and SOUTHCOM have been tackling for decades, and we must calibrate our approach to these regions carefully. I expect today's hearing to help inform that approach. General VanHerck, your command is responsible for protecting the homeland. Importantly, NORTHCOM is tasked with operating our homeland ballistic missile defense, the ground-based mid-course defense system, to defend the United States against intercontinental ballistic missiles and hypersonic missiles. The rapid advancements we have seen on this front from states like China, Russia, and North Korea are concerning, as the nature of hypersonics is difficult to defeat with the technology we currently use. General VanHerck, I would like to know your assessment of the next generation interceptor program's current schedule for deployment, and in light of very recent North Korean missile tests, your confidence in the capability of our current ground-based interceptors to meet these threats. NORTHCOM also continues to play a vital role through its defense support to civil authority mission, by which the U.S. military responds to requests from civil agencies for domestic assistance. This mission was highlighted recently by NORTHCOM's leadership of Operation Allies Welcome, which housed and cared for more than 84,000 evacuees from Afghanistan on military bases across the country. Further, NORTHCOM was integral to our nation's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, when personnel from NORTHCOM and the National Guard distributed vaccines, ran testing centers and food banks, and supported federal health efforts. General VanHerck, I would like to know whether your command and other federal agencies have the preparations in place to manage the next pandemic outbreak or humanitarian crisis should they arise. Turning to Southern Command, SOUTHCOM has traditionally focused on counter-narcotics and counter-transnational criminal organization missions. Even with limited resources, including minimal intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms, SOUTHCOM has sought to leverage non-traditional approaches, such as artificial intelligence and machine learning, to serve as a testbed for new tactics and operational concepts. The SOUTHCOM region also continues to experience a rise in political instability, including violence in Haiti, Cuba, and Venezuela, and security deterioration in the Northern Triangle countries of Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. The political and economic instability in these SOUTHCOM nations presents a situation that China, Russia, and other state actors are now seeking to exploit to increase their own influence. Short of armed conflict, a critical task for SOUTHCOM is to find ways to counter our competitors' malign activities that are coercing our partners. This includes identifying and addressing sources of insecurity and vulnerabilities among our partners that our adversaries seek to exploit to gain leverage or sow division. It is also important to strengthen the resilience of U.S. partners' security forces, including by building defense institutional capabilities that adhere to the rule of law and respect human rights. General Richardson, I'm interested in your assessment of the threat from near-peer competitors in the SOUTHCOM area and how we might work strategically with partners in our neighborhood, such as Mexico and Colombia, to build resilience to China and Russia's malign activities. I want to thank again our witnesses. I look forward to your testimony As a reminder for my colleagues, there will be a closed section immediately following this hearing in room SVC 217. Let me now turn to the ranking member, Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our witnesses who we've known very well for a long period of time. Our attention is rightly focused on Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine and the Chinese Communist Party's constant march toward dominance in the Pacific. General VanHerck, you are responsible for the defense of the homeland. That's the big deal, as we've discussed, given Putin's threats against our homeland during the Ukraine war and China's threats of a military conflict with the United States over Taiwan. I hope you'll candidly speak about your requirements. Do you have the resources that you need, and get in as much detail as you? This is the place to do it. I'm also concerned about the situation on the southwest border. It's a situation that people have quit. Somehow that moved off the front page, and people are not as concerned about that as you would think they should be right now. We've had 12 straight months of 150,000 plus illegal immigrants being stopped at the border. Nothing like that's ever happened before. Last month, the CBP encountered nearly 165,000 illegal immigrants at the border, which is the highest total for February in the Department of Homeland Security's history. Many of my good friends on the other side of the aisle strongly opposed President Trump when he deployed troops to assist the CBP at the border in 2018. But given the scale of the current crisis, General VanHerck, I wonder whether more border support might be necessary in the near future or currently. General Richardson, as we discussed in my office, I'm concerned about the growing Chinese threat in your area of responsibility and its national security implications. What China is doing in SOUTHCOM reminds me of what they were doing in Africa 15 years ago. They're using predatory economic and diplomatic practices to bribe and bully countries while they set conditions to build up their military presence and limit United States access and influence. So I hope you'll explain your strategy for this very daunting task, and I thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Let me recognize General VanHerck for his testimony. General, please, sir.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today alongside General Richardson. It's my honor to represent the men and women of United States Northern Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command as we defend the United States and Canada. United States Northern Command and NORAD face the most dynamic and strategically complex environment in their respective histories. The commands face multiple simultaneous challenges from strategic competitors who have openly declared their intent to hold our homelands at risk in an effort to advance their own interests. Today, strategic competitors, rogue nations, non-state actors possess the capability to strike institutions and critical infrastructure in the United States and Canada. Our country is already under attack every day in the information space and the cyber domain. Our competitors, especially Russia and China, are spreading disinformation, actively sowing division and internal discord with the intent to undermine the foundation of our nation, our democracy, and democracies around the world. We're seeing this play out with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Those same competitors have invested heavily in conventional precision strike capabilities and advanced delivery platforms, which Russia is currently displaying to the world. Their intent is to hold critical infrastructure in the homeland at risk below the nuclear threshold in order to disrupt and delay our ability to project power globally while attempting to undermine our will to intervene in a regional overseas crisis. I believe the strategic deterrent is the foundation of homeland defense and that it is necessary for the United States to maintain a reliable and effective nuclear triad. At the same time, I am concerned that deterrence by cost imposition is currently overweighted and does not adequately account for the conventional capabilities our competitors have already fielded. This over-reliance increases the risk of miscalculation and escalation because it limits our national leaders' options in crisis and in conflict. Our competitors' advanced conventional capabilities make it necessary to balance deterrence by cost imposition with a model of deterrence by denial, an integrated deterrence that employs all elements of national influence, leverages our asymmetric advantage of our alliances and our partnerships, and provides leaders with a wide range of timely deterrence options. We must continually demonstrate to potential aggressors that an attack on our homeland will result in failure. We do that by demonstrating homeland readiness, responsiveness, and resiliency, and by displaying a range of kinetic and non-kinetic capabilities to defend the homeland. NORTHCOM's support of civil authorities, our security cooperation relationships with allies and partners are critical to integrated deterrence, as is NORAD's mission to provide warning and defend the approaches to North America. This strategic environment is the new normal. This operating model that we assumed we could project power globally from a safe and secure homeland has been eroding over the last decade. To provide national leaders with timely and informed options that they need to achieve favorable outcomes, NORTHCOM and NORAD in our Homeland Defense design are focused on 4 key principles. That starts with all domain awareness, from undersea to on orbit and everywhere in between to include cyber domain. All domain awareness is required to achieve information dominance, which is the use of advanced capabilities like machine learning and artificial intelligence to quickly analyze, process, and deliver data to decision makers at the speed of relevance. By doing so, we will increase senior leader decision space and enable decision superiority over our competitors. Finally, today's our problems are global and all domain, and they demand globally integrated strategies, plans, and actions. These principles are vital elements of our ability to execute a layered defense and integrated deterrence, and they are critical to our nation's ability to deter in competition, de-escalate in crisis, and if necessary, defeat in conflict. I'll end by thanking the committee for all you've done to support our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians. The FY22 NDAA and the recent passage of the FY22 Appropriations Omnibus continue to advance our national defense priorities and the missions of U.S. Northern Command and NORAD. Today's strategic environment calls for sustained, sufficient, and predictable funding in order to prevail. Persistently operating under continuing resolutions over the last decade has contributed to the erosion of our nation's competitive advantage. I join my fellow commanders, the service chiefs, and the Secretary in expressing my appreciation for the resources provided in the FY22 Omnibus and in urging the on-time passage of both the NDAA and a full-year appropriations bill for FY22, or 23, excuse me. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. General Richardson, please, your testimony.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you alongside General VanHerck, my most important teammate in keeping the Western Hemisphere safe. I'm honored to be here with you representing the men and women of U.S. Southern Command to discuss the challenges we share with our neighbors in this hemisphere and the opportunities that we can unlock together. Today, more than ever, America's fate is inextricably linked to events beyond our shores. This region, our shared neighborhood, is under assault from a host of transboundary challenges that directly threaten our own homeland. I've been in command almost 5 months now, and the biggest eye-opener for me has been the extent to which China and Russia are aggressively expanding their influence in our neighborhood. Latin America and the Caribbean are experiencing insecurity and instability that has been greatly exacerbated by COVID-19. The People's Republic of China, our long-term strategic competitor, continues its relentless march to expand economic, diplomatic, technological, informational, and military influence in Latin America and the Caribbean, and challenges U.S. influence in all these domains. Without U.S. leadership and modest investment, negative PRC influence in this region could soon resemble the self-serving predatory influence it now holds in Africa, Let's be clear, the PRC doesn't invest, they extract. Meanwhile, Russia, a more immediate threat, is increasing its engagements in the hemisphere as Putin looks to keep his options open and maintain relationships in our near abroad. In January, the Russian deputy foreign minister said he could neither affirm or exclude that Russia would send military assets to Cuba and Venezuela. Just days before the Russian unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, the Russian deputy prime minister visited Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela, countries that maintain close ties with Russia and offer Putin a foothold in our hemisphere. Finally, recent visits between the presidents of Brazil and Argentina with Putin in Russia demonstrate a concerning potentially broadening of Russia ties in the region. In this hemisphere, transnational criminal organizations operate nearly uncontested and blaze a trail of corruption and violence that creates a wedge and allows the PRC and Russia to exploit these countries. They threaten citizen security, undermine public confidence in government institutions, and drive irregular migration to our homeland. These TCOs traffic opioids, cocaine, and other deadly drugs into the U.S., fueling both drug overdoses and drug-related violence. In my initial travels to Latin America and the Caribbean, it's become obvious to me that our partners are our best defense as we work together to counter our shared threats. We must use all available levers to strengthen our partnerships with the 28 like-minded democracies in this hemisphere. We must maximize important tools like security cooperation programs to train and equip our partner militaries, multilateral exercises to build interoperability, and the State Department's IMET, FMF, and FMS programs to educate, train, and build capacity that our partners use to stand shoulder to shoulder with us. Colombia, for example, our strongest partner in the region, exports security by training other Latin American militaries to counter transnational threats. U.S. SOUTHCOM is putting integrated deterrence into action every day using innovative methods to work seamlessly in all domains with the other combatant commands, the Joint Force, allies and partner nations, Congress, the U.S. interagency, NGOs, and the private sector. Now more than ever, the U.S. must lead in this hemisphere, and that requires consistent focus and a sustained investment to help build a shared neighborhood that is free, secure, and prosperous for our generation and generations to come. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much, General Richardson, and thank you also, General VanHerck. General VanHerck, the North Korean missile activity is quite disturbing. Indeed, hours ago, they launched a missile which, from analysis of the flight path, suggests could hit the United States. Given this behavior, what are your thoughts about the current 44 ground-based interceptors and their current capability?
Chairman, I'm comfortable with where we are today based on the intelligence I have with the current capabilities and capacity of North Korea. Going forward, I do believe that they could exceed my capacity and capabilities. That's why it's crucial to keep next generation interceptor on time or early. In my discussions with Admiral Hill, he's confident right now that they're on that path. As far as the total number of 44 interceptors, that's a policy decision. I look forward to seeing the Missile Defense Review and the policy that it provides and guidance to me to get after the capacity and challenges that you allude to, sir.
So you are, at this point, confident that the next generation interceptor is on track for deployment? I think the plan is 20 interceptors at Fort Greely by FY 2028. Is that still holding?
That is correct, and I'm confident that it is on track for that now or slightly early, based on what I've seen.
Very good. You have made your input into the National Defense Strategy, which is yet to be announced. Are you confident that your sort of contribution will be forwarded to us?
I am confident that my input will be included. They've been very transparent in the department as they've worked this.
Thank you very much, sir. General Richardson, SOUTHCOM, because of a lack of resources, which as a veteran of USARSO, I can tell you has been the case for many, many decades, is now relying upon artificial intelligence and other new technologies to compensate. Could you comment upon what you're doing and how successful you are?
Absolutely, Chairman. So the advanced ISR or non-traditional ISR that we utilize, since we're not given a lot of resources, we look for other ways of being innovative and using other capabilities that either the Department of Defense has or the other services are trying to use. And so we'll use that all different kinds of capabilities that use the AI and ML, a lot with unclassified data that can rapidly sort through that data, and then we use it to tip and cue what limited assets, the higher end assets that we do have to help out with our challenges in the AOR.
And you're working closely with the Department of Defense to essentially test some new innovative prototypes in a whole range of both air, land, and sea?
Absolutely, and we have 5 joint capability technology demos that we have in the AOR. And I'd like to highlight in a permissive environment, I offer that because where our adversaries maybe aren't paying as much close attention to us, we can put that to real-world use in our area of operations. And then it helps me with domain awareness to find our threats, see what our threats are doing, because the area war is so big.
Well, I want to thank you because I know you've been in contact with civil society groups, particularly the Sisters of Mercy, and this whole of government and beyond approach is necessary everywhere, but particularly in SOUTHCOM. And in the Northern Triangle, particularly Honduras, there's a need to support the recently elected government and to begin seriously isolating individuals who are either involved with criminal activities or other inappropriate activities and support a more vibrant constitutional order. And I thank you for that. Any comments about the situation in the Northern Triangle?
Well, first, Chairman, I've had 2 meetings so far with the human rights leaders, and Sisters of Mercy being one of them, Human Rights Watch, and a couple of others. And they have such an important perspective of the region. They've been traveling there for decades. They've been working in those countries for decades. And certainly taking their perspective and their insight of what they've seen over that period of time is truly valuable. And we bake human rights into everything that we do in U.S. SOUTHCOM. I have a human rights office in SOUTHCOM. We have had that for 25 years, but it's not about having an office. It's actually what you do with that capability and how we make that a priority in everything that we do in the AOR.
Thank you very much, General VanHerck and General Richardson. Let me recognize Senator Inhofe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said in my opening statement, the crisis on the border has worsened considerably under the current administration. We've had 12 straight months of over 150,000 illegal migrants, which was a 63% increase from February 2021 and a DHS record for the month of February. And according to the internal Border Patrol estimates, from January through August of 21, over 273,000 migrants avoided apprehension and entered our country illegally. These are new records. This has not happened before. I'm deeply concerned that the crisis will soon get even worse. As we discussed in my office, if the Biden administration ends the Title 42 border policy in April, illegal immigration will surge even beyond the current record-setting levels. So, General VanHerck, given the worsening conditions and the crisis at the southwest border, are you aware of any discussion within the administration or DHS that could result in any requests for additional troops at that border?
Senator Inhofe, there is a request from the Department of Homeland Security. It's in the planning stages right now of the department to provide additional capability or capacity based on the potential for additional immigration or folks coming to the southwest border. I don't have the details of that right now, and I haven't been tasked to provide any additional support to the Department of Homeland Security at this time.
And I understand that, but it is a reality that's in discussion. General Richardson, it's clear that SOUTHCOM continues to be under-resourced despite all of the threats in your AOR, and that's something that we need to take a closer look at as we develop our NDAA, and we'll have to do that. Now, in China, as we discussed in my office this week, I'm concerned about their growing presence in SOUTHCOM and consequences for our military. So, General Richardson, what do you find most concerning about China's growing presence in your AOR, and how could it be, could it undermine DOD's ability to operate in this years to come?
So thank you, Senator. And my concern regarding China in the region is just the presence and the access and presence that they have, and they've been able to create, partly due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic rollbacks that this has had in the region. So 8% of the world's population is in SOUTHCOM AOR. 33% of the world's COVID deaths were suffered. So they've had a hard time with that. Economy has contracted 8%, plunging 22% of the population into poverty. And so when these 28 like-minded democracies in this region, out of 31, are trying to deliver for their people, it's hard. And when China has the Belt and Road Initiative, 21 of the 31 countries in this region have signed up and are signatories to that BRI. They need to show that they're delivering for their populations, and infrastructure projects is probably the best way that, with the BRI that shows progress. But as we know, the work is not done to standard. A lot of times it leaves these countries with even more debt than when they started. A highway in Jamaica. Jamaica now has 6 loans as a result of this. They lost 1,200 acres of land. And, oh, by the way, the highway has a toll on it that most Jamaicans can't even drive on. The Chinese don't bring in and don't hire host nation workers. They bring in Chinese laborers, so they don't invest. It looks like they're investing. All they do is they take, they extract, and they have strings tied to what they offer.
Yeah, you and I talked about this in the office. It's so similar to what the Chinese have been doing now for about 15 years in Africa. It's no surprises here, but I think it's important we get into the record what is happening now, because it's happening in your AOR, something that you didn't anticipate. I didn't, none of us anticipated the gravity of that situation. I'm glad you're there at the helm. Thank you.
Senator, what I would like to mention are my 2 greatest concerns strategically, and that's with the Panama Canal, the projects that the Chinese have around the Panama Canal, which is a strategic line of communication that we want to keep free and open for the global economy, but also for our global war plans. Also the Straits of Magellan, down around the tip of the southern cone from Argentina. And the presence of China and projects and things like that. And so that's what bothers me most, are those 2 strategic global lines of communication areas that the Chinese have projects in and around those areas.
Yeah, with everything that's going on now, I think it's important that we, and you particularly, need to keep reminding us of that, because that's something that people are just not aware of. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Inhofe. Let me recognize Senator Gillibrand, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Richardson, just to continue the line of questioning that Senator Inhofe started, given the investments that China's making, regardless of how extractive they are, what do you think our best response is? And in particular, can you talk a little bit about how we're engaging with elected governments in the region to counter authoritarian actors? Are we collaborating with agencies and other institutions, with partner countries like judiciaries, legislatures, NGOs to support human rights and democracy? And further, I do want to get a sense of China's also adopted a partner force training model that is of some concern to me, and I'd like you to assess how effective is China's partner force training in those countries that participate, and how do we ensure these relationships are not enduring?
So the way I look at it, Senator, is in terms of our partnerships, the U.S. has partners. China has clients. They don't have the partners, and our partner nations in the SOUTHCOM AOR want to partner with us. I go to these countries. I have visited Colombia, Brazil, Jamaica, Belize, where I got to visit with leaders from 7 Central American countries. Honduras, and you look in their eyes and they want to partner with us, and they're having a hard time delivering for their population. I will tell you, though, that the PRC is using our playbook in terms of how I do security cooperation and the other combatant commands, the train and equip, the partnering, the exercises. The Chinese don't have exercises like we do. When we have exercises, the U.S., I'll bring 19, 21, 29 different countries together. As I said, they want to partner with us, and we have partners. A great relationship with the Interagency and Department of State in the AOR I'd like to highlight. I have my deputy, who is a former ambassador for El Salvador, sitting behind me, Jean Maines. And I'll tell you, we're so lucky to have an ambassador from the Department of State who can help bridge and communicate and help us work more collaboratively with our chiefs of mission in the AOR. We have 12 more to go for ambassadors to fill those very important seats, and 8 have been nominated. So thank you for your support in getting those ambassadors in there as quickly as possible.
And then just one final question before I move on to General VanHerck. SOUTHCOM has played an important role in humanitarian operations, especially in nations like Haiti, where U.S. support was needed not only after the natural disaster, but after the political crisis. Can you explain how you foresee any changes to SOUTHCOM's posture to continue providing humanitarian assistance, especially as climate and other issues continue to increase migration?
We'll continue to watch this AOR, Haiti, all of the challenges that we have in this AOR that are ongoing, and work very closely with for a whole of government, a democratic solution, and to instability and insecurity in the region. We take that very seriously. We bake in, as I said before, human rights, the rule of law, everything that we do in our security cooperation programs. Everything that I do, my main lever, because I don't get assigned forces in SOUTHCOM, I get very limited gift map resources that are assigned to me as well. So I really rely on that 333 security and cooperation funding to work with these partner nations to help them increase the capacity and capability of their militaries or their defense forces.
That's helpful, General. Thank you. General VanHerck, China has attempted to establish a foothold in the Arctic through economic relationships with smaller Arctic states like Iceland, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland that grant China access to their vital natural resources. This strategy is coupled with an increase in China's Arctic capabilities to create something like a polar Silk Road. Do you see these relationships as leading to an eventual movement of Chinese military assets into the region? And then further, New York Air National Guard conducts several unique missions in support of our scientific missions with the National Scientific Foundation in the Arctic. Can you speak to the importance of our scientific missions in the Arctic and how it supports our overall strategic goals when it comes to that region?
Thanks. First, Senator, absolutely, the Chinese are active in the Arctic. Each of the last 5 years, they've sent a vessel under the guise of a research vessel into the Arctic. For military purposes, we assess as well. And so they're there. They're influencing nations. They want to change and influence international norms and behavior as well. I would also point out, Senator, that the Arctic is a strategic location, and being able to operate persistently in the Arctic is something that we need to do. So the research that you're talking about is crucial in the investments. Finally, I understand my time's up, but they're not only active in the Arctic, they're active in the Bahamas, they're active in Mexico as well, and I would point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Thank you. Senator Wicker, please.
General VanHerck, let's keep talking about the Arctic then. During your posture hearing last year, I asked you about the Coast Guard's authorization to build 6 new icebreakers, and I appreciated your response in support of these ships. But as on the other hand, Nome, Alaska, nearly 800 miles north of Dutch Harbor, has been granted money to dredge and develop a port in order to provide services to deep draft ships. How would additional icebreakers and the development of the port in Nome enable NORTHCOM to accomplish your mission in the Arctic?
Thanks, Senator. First, the 6 icebreakers that are on plan for the Coast Guard are crucial to enabling persistence to operate within the Arctic. Persistence is also enabled by having fuel capability further north than currently in Dutch Harbor, in Nome, as you alluded to. That allows either the Coast Guard, through their cutters, or their icebreakers, or Navy vessels to remain more persistent. That's strategically important to that location. I would like to clarify one thing. The Infrastructure and Jobs Act that was just passed provided about $250 million for the Port of Nome. The dredging portion of that is not currently funded, and it would require that dredging from a 30-foot depth to 40-foot for these vessels that we're talking about to get in there. We're going to work closely to make sure we can get that additional funding for that persistence I need.
So the additional funding is not adequate unless we get the dredging done.
It is certainly adequate for commercial operations, benefit from the local communities, indigenous people in Alaska, absolutely. For military use, we have to get the additional dredging. That's correct.
Okay. Let me switch to General Richardson. The Navy Small Craft Instruction and Technical Training School, NAVSCIATS, provides training to partner nations from every combatant command. To date, the school has trained over 13,000 students from more than 120 partner nations. What's the importance of keeping NAVSCIATS? What are the potential risks in terms of international support and partnerships should its capacity be reduced?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator, because NAVSCIATS is a force multiplier. And it's for all of our nations. As you said, 123 partner nations utilize this school, over 13,000 trained. This school has been open for 52 years, and quite honestly, what it does, low level, it's pennies to operate. You talk about a low cost, high return on investment, this is it. And quite honestly, if you think about it, the U.S. Navy has big ships. Other nations, there are very few other nations that have really big vessels. And most of the other navies and coast guards from the other partner nation militaries, as well as the coast guards, have smaller vessels. You talk about the Amazon. They don't have highways, they have rivers. And they need the training. They need their smaller vessels to get this training, and it's absolutely critical to our security cooperation and helping build our defense forces and our militaries and naval maritime operations.
I do appreciate that. Let me follow up on an engagement that Senator Inhofe and Senator Gillibrand had with you. I think the discussion with Senator Inhofe was like-minded democracies in SOUTHCOM working with us. Senator Gillibrand asked about engaging with elected governments. Let me just mention that the Organization of American States is based here in Washington, D.C., is the only multilateral organization that includes every country in the Western Hemisphere except for Cuba. And I would point out to my colleagues that in 2020, President Trump signed into law the Organization of American States Legislative Engagement Act. Senator Cardin and I were leaders in this effort, just as we have tried to enhance our participation with European parliamentarians, both in and out of majorities in government in Europe through the OSCE. Do you agree that moving to a parliamentary assembly, as the Trump law anticipates, would be a positive and could promote cooperation in a variety of government and security issues.
Senator, I think that increased engagement in this AOR can be nothing but good. I can only cover so much. Our Department of State can only cover so much. And with a program, a strategy, a focus on this area, as I said in my opening statement, can only be more goodness, because out of 31 countries and 16 dependencies in the Caribbean, it's a lot of ground to cover. And I would certainly welcome the focus and the attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. And now, since a quorum is present, I ask the committee to consider a list of 2,766 pending military nominations. All of these nominations have been before the committee the required length of time. Is there a motion to favorably report this list of 2,766 pending military nominations to the Senate? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Thank you very much. The motion carries. And let me recognize Senator Kane and thank Senator Tillis for staying with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to our witnesses for your service. General Richardson, I want to echo a point that Senator Inhofe made. I continue to believe that SOUTHCOM is really under-resourced. You've talked about the value of the security cooperation program. Describe the kinds of activities that you engage with our regional partners and through the security cooperation program.
So we have a myriad of things that we do in terms of the training and the equipping. We do things from small teams, 8 to 13-man teams. We do it in all the domains, special ops included, cyber, information ops. We do big exercises, as I mentioned before, Panamex, which is really a defense of the Panama Canal exercise. 29 countries from this AOR participate in that with us. We have trade winds. That's been a name that's been around for decades, and that's a security operation in a contested environment that we train to. That will bring 21 countries together. My components, my Navy component will do UNITAS this year. Brazil will host that. That will bring 19 countries together. And when you see the picture of UNITAS, of all the different vessels, the ships, and vessels from the other countries and the navies and the coast guards, it's just really impressive.
And General Richardson, just to give the committee kind of a magnitude, you have nearly 30 countries in your AOR. I believe Admiral Fowler last year testified that the total security cooperation budget for SOUTHCOM to do the activities you described with that many nations is $120 million. So that's sort of what we're talking about, right?
That's correct, Senator. And I know that seems like a lot of money, but when I don't have assigned forces and gift map capabilities, and that's my main lever for engaging with the partner nations, that's really a low-cost, high return on investment.
Let me ask about another program, the IMET program, International Military Education Training Program. That's another, security cooperation tends to be in the AOR, but IMET, we bring leaders from SOUTHCOM militaries, nations to the United States for training. That is also very small budget, but describe to the committee the value of the IMET program in SOUTHCOM.
It's huge. That's the professional military education. That's where they get to come, for example, to our War College, which is at the lieutenant colonel level. Right now, I have 17 chiefs of defense and 6 ministers of defense that have been to school in the United States. They know that they get the best education and training when they come here. They want to come here. And what we try to work with at $13 million annually is to have sustained, consistent personnel from their militaries attending our professional military education.
Well, these are both relatively small investments in SOUTHCOM, a region without assigned forces, as General Richardson says. And I'm just going to suggest to my committee colleagues, watch this space. I think there's going to be a budget submitted to us very soon, and look at the dollars in these two accounts to SOUTHCOM. I have a grave concern that challenges elsewhere in the world are going to take these de minimis investments and shrink them even more. And if that's the case, I'm going to be advocating strongly that we don't do less, but we do more. in the region. My understanding, General Richardson, is also with respect to cyber assets. I know nations like Colombia are dealing with a lot of cyber attacks and misinformation from actors in Venezuela and elsewhere. They get particularly active around elections. There's many elections that are happening in the region this year. U.S. Cyber Command has so much on them. I understand in SOUTHCOM, your cyber assets are pretty limited. You're making good use of a state partnership program with the South Carolina Guard. Good on them and good on you for using them in an effective way, but I understand that Cyber Command does not have many assets that it can currently allow to be used in SOUTHCOM. Am I right about that?
That's correct, Senator. They have higher priorities looking towards Europe and then also in the Indo-PACOM region. And I'd just like to highlight and thank all the senators for the support of this National Guard State Partnership Program, which is a huge force multiplier for SOUTHCOM.
We are not paying attention to this region. We're not paying attention to them on diplomatic circles. We're not paying sufficient attention to them in terms of vaccine distribution, and we're not paying attention to them in the military area. But other nations, especially China, are paying a lot of attention, and I think we should do better. I want to thank you for your testimony.
Well, thank you, Senator Kane, and let me now recognize Senator Fisher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Richardson, General VanHerck, thank you so much for being here today. General VanHerck, in your prepared testimony's discussion of hypersonic threats, you state, quote, "The impact is the loss of critical decision space for national-level decision makers regarding continuity of government and the preservation of retaliatory capabilities, resulting in an increase in the potential for strategic deterrence failure," end quote. You make a similar assessment of cruise missile threats, saying, quote, "Additionally, these advanced cruise missiles and their supporting platforms will limit national leadership decision space and my ability to provide threat warning and attack assessment, which directly influences my ability to support continuity of government operations and provide support to STRATCOM missions. Again, the potential consequence is an increased risk of strategic deterrence failure." Can you elaborate, please, on what you mean about the threat to continuity of government and the risk of deterrence failure?
Senator, sure. So one of my biggest challenges is domain awareness, and hypersonics and cruise missiles significantly challenge my ability to conduct my NORAD mission of providing threat warning and attack assessment. What you can't see and what you can't deter and you can't defend from, and they will significantly challenge me. Why I primarily do that is exactly to support continuity of government and the survivable of our nuclear posture, our nuclear forces as well. And when you can't do that, then you have to make some assumptions that those threats might be nuclear threats that will be inbound, and that increases the risk of miscalculation and also the risk of strategic deterrence failure. So that's my number one priority, is to gain that domain awareness so I can provide that threat warning and attack assessment. I'm currently not tasked to defend against hypersonics. I look forward to seeing the Missile Defense Review. I am tasked to defend against cruise missiles, and that's a very tough mission for me right now without domain awareness.
Thank you. You mentioned NORAD. Could you update us on our partnership with the Canadians there, please?
Well, the Canadians are an outstanding ally. Militarily, I have hundreds of them working for us at the headquarters at NORAD, my combined headquarters. I've met multiple times. The Chief of the Defense Staff, my boss on the NORAD side, is coming to visit me next week as well. Minister Anand, I've met with her in person as well in Canada. Great allies. Canada is in the decision-making process to support NORAD modernization. I look forward to seeing where they go with NORAD modernization. I think the world requires us to think hard about modernizing the forces to operate across the entire AOR for NORAD, which includes the Arctic and the infrastructure and the communication capabilities as well. And so I look forward to seeing what they come up with.
Thank you. We saw this morning that North Korea did another long-range missile test to demonstrate that their ballistic missile capabilities continue to grow and that the threat to the homeland, I believe, is continuing to increase. With this in mind, is it your view that next generation interceptor, the NGI, needs to be fielded as soon as possible?
Absolutely, Senator. As soon as we can get that here, I'm confident the contract mechanism rewards fielding it faster, and I'm glad it's on track right now.
To be clear on this, when you say it's on track right now, so to be clear on this, do you think delaying the schedule or changing the requirements would put us at a serious risk of being unable to pace ballistic missile threats to our homeland?
Senator, I'm very concerned about my ability to pace the capacity of production that we assess and the capability that we assess the North Koreans continue to adapt to. That's why the funding for the service life extension program for the current ballistic missile defense capability is so crucial. Thank you for that funding. And that's why Next Generation Interceptor is crucial as well, because it will help both get after the additional capacity problems and the capability problems.
Thank you. General Richardson, in the time we have remaining, can you talk about the role that you see that China and Russia are playing in your AOR, and specifically, how do we improve the relations we have, the quality of our engagements to better compete? I know we're friends, and they're clients, viewed as clients, but can you be more specific on what needs to be done?
The way I'm on the field, I don't need to outspend China to outcompete them, but I do need my security cooperation funding, that 333 funding, to do security cooperation to help build the capacity and capability within those militaries and defense forces, which helps them secure their borders, which helps them with internal security in their country, and then also be exporters of training to other Latin American countries, and then in peacekeeping operations around the world, too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator King, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to NORTHCOM, EUCOM, and PACOM, my concern is that in a moment of crisis is a question of who's in charge. Are you satisfied with the coordination level between the three combatant commands and the Canadians in case of some kind of a crisis in the Arctic?
Senator, I'm comfortable with the way the Unified Campaign Plan is currently laid out. We have outstanding relationships with Canada, outstanding relationships with EUCOM and Indo-PACOM. I do think we need to look at, based on threat changes, how we would command and control those capabilities. So, for example, the threats to the homeland today do not reside in my area of responsibility. They are actually existing in other areas of responsibility, such as the Indo-PACOM area of responsibility and the EUCOM area of responsibility. So I do think there's potential gaps and seams that we need to make sure that we close those in a time of crisis and conflict to ensure we don't have challenges that we're unaccounted for.
That's exactly my question, and I hope that there will be work actively done to close those gaps and seams, because we don't want to be working on that in the middle of a crisis. We want the structure to be on the shelf, ready to operationalize. Can the current missile defense system that we have defend us against hypersonics?
Senator, I'm not tasked to defend against them, but no, it can't, because we don't have the domain awareness at this time.
We don't have the domain awareness. We also don't have the technology to deal. So I think that's important to understand, that we do have missile defense. It's important for ballistic missiles, but it will not suffice when it comes to hypersonics. General Richardson, could you estimate what percentage of worldwide ISR resources we have to utilize in the SOUTHCOM AOR?
So, Senator, I get about 1% or a little bit less than 1% of the global ISR.
That's what I was afraid you were going to say, and I frankly am I just can't believe that, because we're talking, America is under attack. The principal attack on America right now is drugs. 300 people a day, that's one 9/11 every 2 weeks. 2 people in my state every day are dying of overdoses. And yet, we're treating it as if it's some kind of domestic problem or a law enforcement problem. This is an attack, and the fact that you have 1% of the ISR to keep track of this threat, to me, is a gross misallocation of resources. I realize it's not your responsibility, but I guess my next question is, why, in your opinion, are we so short of ISR? If we need it in a particular area, why don't we build more Global Hawks? I just don't understand why this is not something that we can't budget for and deal with.
So, Senator, and all my fellow combatant commanders will always say that we don't have enough to see and be able to see the threats in our AOR.
Well, the budget ought to reflect that fact so that we can fill that gap. I mean, that's a pretty straightforward sort of mathematical question.
Well, and I certainly appreciate Congress always gives me a little extra funding for ISR, and so we have some contracted, operated, contractor-owned assets for airplanes that actually help me with ISR in the region, be able to look for threats and look for counter-narcotics, illicit trafficking.
Let me ask you the same question that I asked General VanHerck, and that is, one of my principles of management is that you always want to have one throat to choke. Who's in charge of the anti-drug activities in Latin America? Who's in charge?
So, Senator, I am in charge for detection and monitoring, and that is to get actionable information about illicit drug trafficking, either by air or maritime.
Who's in charge of interdiction?
And for interdiction, that would be DHS and our law enforcement agencies.
But there's no one individual who can be held responsible for the overall dealing with this issue. Is that correct?
I would say that that would be our Department of Homeland Security, Senator.
Well, I think that's something we have to strengthen and clarify. I'm not going to pursue this, but for the record, I would hope you would give us more detail on what you mentioned earlier about the Panama Canal and Chinese activity, I understand, at either end of the Panama Canal, as well as the Straits of Magellan. I think that's a very, very serious matter and would like to have more detail. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.